Hey guys, happy Tuesday. So what we did today, I'm just going to jump right into it. What we did today had to do with us kind of finalizing our approach into A Christmas Carol by really just immersing ourselves in the life of Charles Dickens and getting a feel for England in 1843 when he wrote this. See, Charles Dickens was born 201 years ago, and you can go back and get a really in-depth look at his life from that documentary I posted last Tuesday. But I did want to walk through the text that we used as a close reading text today in class to really finalize, if you weren't really sure what we were talking about in class, or if you maybe nodded off, not fell asleep, but like kind of went out. We had to talk about that in some classes today, about being fully present mentally, because that's the only way we improve and avoid the harsh realities of not doing something like that in the real world, okay, for some of you classes. I really want you to get a sense for author's purpose in this case, because we know that author's purpose and main idea are linked. That's the whole reason for us reading and trying to connect with that author, is to determine their main idea, because that's what they want to get across to us as an audience member. That's why we analyze character, plot, conflict, theme. That's why we figure out how conflict alters plot so much that the plot map is skewed by it. All those breaks in the plot map have to do with conflict and how conflict is at the heart of things. Well, conflict was also at the heart of Charles's life. It's a hard knock life for Charles. It's a hard knock life for Charles. No? Okay, fine. Charles Dickens had a really tough go of a childhood and an early adolescence. And to remind you, Charles's dad was thrown into jail along with most of his family because his family couldn't work. We're talking about 1840s. His little kid siblings and his mom couldn't get jobs. Women weren't employed, at least for money. They were employed as maids or laundry washerwomen, and they usually earned their money, their payment, in the form of food or clothing or shelter. They actually would live in the houses of the people that they were maids for. So they didn't really make any money. So when Charles's father was imprisoned for being in debt, yes, you used to go to prison for that. They would throw you into jail if you couldn't pay your debts. But the logic there is a little weird, because if you're in jail, you can't be earning money, which means that you would have essentially stay in jail the rest of your life unless somebody could afford to bail you out and pay off all of your debts, which usually, by our standards of today's money, would be somewhere in the realm of like $100,000, $200,000, way more money than any one person, unless they were rich, could actually ever come up with. Well, it turns out that Charles had to go away from his family, and his sister, who was old enough to work in a house, went away to work in another house, and he was alone by himself at 12 years old, working in a shoe polish factory with all those fumes and all of these really dangerous pieces of equipment that would often take kids' hands, arms, legs, limbs, lives. And it was because these factories could pay kids way less than an adult. Think about if I wanted to mow my lawn, if I wanted to have somebody mow my lawn, if I was going to ask an adult to do it, I would have to pay them way more money than I could find a kid who would be willing to do the same job. Same principle back then. And so he was working 12-hour days at the age of 12 to make just a little bit of money so that he could scratch together to afford to live somewhere, usually in the factories, by the way, in different rooms, to try to get his dad out of prison. This was miserable, and it derailed all of the hope in his life, and he was separated from his family. He just had this really tough life. And I won't read the whole thing to you that we read today, but I do want to read his reaction to it, because I think it's going to inform us an awful lot about Charles Dickens' purpose for writing this. Because we look at it, we look at the title, A Christmas Carol. Well, and again, I'm not trying to push religion on you here. This is not me trying to convert you, but understand that especially in 1840, and even to a certain extent now, England and America, which are the two countries that Dickens was the most famous and is the most famous in today, are Christian-based nations. Like the nations were founded on Christian principles. We even say one nation under God. Some people debate whether or not we should say that, but we still do. That's how deep-rooted our Christian roots are. So really this is more of a historical context for you. Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol to spread the Christmas cheer. Christmas, Christ is at the root of that. Jesus Christ is a historical fact. Whether you believe he was who he said he was or did the things that people claim he did, he's a historical fact. He existed and he did preach about love, hope, peace, generosity, treating others as you would have them treat you and as you would treat yourself. Really these principles that really come out during the Christmas season, they have their root in the teachings of Jesus Christ, hence Christmas. Well, we go sing Christmas carols to kind of bring that spirit to other people. As a matter of fact, the chapters in this book aren't actually called chapters, they're called staves, like staffs for music. So really this whole book was designed to be a big metaphor for spreading the message of the holiday season. Because we remember that in 1843, Christmas wasn't like it is today. This whole concept of truckloads of gifts that people buy each other and Santa brings and all of this stuff, that's a concept that was introduced in America to boost the economy in the 1930s. Look it up. Wikipedia, the history of Christmas. It's really an interesting thing. Christmas back then looked an awful lot like Thanksgiving does today for us in this country, where it's all about family, all about giving, all about being thankful, all about spending time, all about being mindful of other people and their needs. That's really what Christmas looked like back then, just to give you a little historical context. But back to Charles Dickens. He was writing that because he wrote this book because stuff was so heavy on his heart from his childhood that it haunted him. And I'm going to read you just how much it haunted him. Because remember, this was a famous guy. Before TV, before radio, before the internet. He was famous on continents he had never ever set foot on. That's crazy famous. And you're about to see why. Okay? Oh, I lost the page. Where is that page? There it is. Talking about this whole childhood of Charles. These experiences were the most painful of Charles's life, so painful that he found it difficult even to speak of them. In a fragment of an autobiography, which we remember is something that somebody writes about themselves, that he never finished, he wrote, "No words can express the secret agony of my soul as I felt my early hopes of growing up to be a learned and distinguished man crushed in my breast. The deep remembrance of the sense I had of being utterly neglected and hopeless, of the shame I felt in my position, of the misery it was to my young heart to believe that day by day what I had learned and thought and delighted in was passing away from me, never to be brought back any more, cannot be written. My whole nature was so penetrated with the grief and humiliation of such considerations that even now, famous, pardon me, famous and caressed and happy, I often forget in my dreams that I have a dear wife and children, even that I am a man, and wander desolately back to that time in my life." He was so haunted by his past that even being rich, famous, having a family, everything every person dreams about, in his dreams when he went to sleep, he was haunted by his childhood. That's how bad it weighed on him. Although the autobiography was never finished, the book continues, Dickens drew on his experiences in his novels. For example, in David Copperfield, the young hero is sent to work in a blacking warehouse, a shoe polish factory, just like Charles Dickens. And the novel Little Dorrit is set in a prison, where his father and family was, right? And we even see in other stories this concept of the love of someone's life being taken away, just like in his life, we learned in that documentary last week, happened to him. These beautiful women who are put on pedestals who can never be attained. Same thing. It's easy for readers to conclude that the compassion we are made to feel for some of his characters comes from the depths of Dickens' feelings about his own misfortunes. And that's really true. So we see, and as a matter of fact, I'll skip, it says about A Christmas Carol, he worked quickly, completing it in 6 weeks. This is with a printing press, not with a laser printer. You couldn't even do this today. That shows from the seed of his idea to when the book was in the hands was 6 weeks. That is crazy. They arranged them letter by letter, spread ink on them, stamped an entire page, and that was one page. And they had to do that to get the 6 weeks? Crazy. That shows you how passionate he was about this subject. The story was an immediate success with critics and readers, and it's still an enormously popular story. In it, Dickens presents the essence of his belief that being poor is not shameful, that in fact there is virtue in poverty, just as there is virtue in generosity and the love of our fellow human beings. So he's saying that all of this stuff, and I'm going to let my phone go to voicemail, so hopefully that's not any of your parents calling. But it says, A Christmas Carol, what he wanted to get out was this sense that people are still capable of being virtuous and good, even in the midst of poverty, and that the generosity that people show other people. We remember the only way Dickens' family got out of prison is because somebody extraordinarily close to them died and left them everything they had. So, yes, in one sense there's joy that they were able to be freed from prison, but on the other hand, they missed out on the last months of one of the dearest people that they held to them on earth because they were in prison for their debt. All of this swirls together, and we really get a clear picture of the author himself and the world that he lived in and what he was trying to put forth by writing A Christmas Carol. We're going to start exploring this book tomorrow, but I wanted you to get a clear sense of author's purpose because that's our link to the author, to be able to connect with the main idea and what he was really trying to say with this book, A Christmas Carol. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.